This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
We talk about walking the ridgeline, and on the side of the ridgeline on the top of the mountain, you could fall off to one side, and that would be humility. So we often find clients come to us when they're feeling really humbled by what's happening to them in their business, right? And the thing we ask them to be leery of is the other side. We will help them get to the top of the ridgeline where they have to balance. And on the other side is ego.
Hello, and welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chilinsky. My guest today is Gary Cohen. He's the managing partner and co-founder of CO2 Partners, an executive coach offering their clients insights and alternative courses of action. We talked about the role of permission, style management, the role of fear in organizations, and how do you find the balance as a leader? I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. I know I did. Gary, I'm so excited that we found time to sit down together. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I am also very excited to be on your show.
The first question, I start with everyone. What is one thing that you've done in any part of your life that you never thought you would do?
Steal a car.
Really?
Right? Isn't that fun? It turns out that somebody was supposed to leave a car for me.
Okay.
And at the airport with the keys in under the mat. Well, I shared that with the two people I was traveling with, and they went to a car that is exactly how it was described. And the keys were in the center. We drove off. We used it for a week. We tried to track it down. We tried to do everything. It turns out that we didn't break a law until such time as a case is opened about the car, but the police wouldn't tell us if a case was open. So we weren't willing to reveal anything. So it just went, but that's the one thing. It's right? Who would have ever thought?
No, I would never have thought it was possible to accidentally steal a car.
And we spent a lot of money on lawyers to try to figure it all out and do it the right way. And the institution did not want to have it.
Sure. I'm glad that the end result wasn't some sort of high or low speed chase across the highways.
Nothing like that.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
That is a very interesting story. So we're going to pivot, and now we're talking about the concept of compassion. And just to get us started, I'm curious, how do you define compassion?
I don't think that I've ever really defined it other than like feeling or knowing it in me for someone. Like it's so clear when somebody doesn't have it, right? There's like an edge to it. They're not reading the room or the person in how they're reacting to whatever's being said. I think when I reflect on my own leadership in the early days of my company, we grew a company from 2 to 2,200 people. And there was a lot of growth. And I think the adult me the older me today has embarrassment around some of those moments of youthful pursuit of something at all costs. And when I say all costs, not breach in ethics, but breach in compassion. And I don't know if it's fully true, meaning if we talk to people who worked with me, whether they would say that. I suspect if they were being honest, they would. And they'd also would have seen a growth and development of me over time with compassion.
And I think that's one of the keys. We all have those youthful mistakes, we'll call them, or learning opportunities. And it's can we grow from that as we get older and we learn more? As they say, when you know better, you do better. One thing I think of when I think about the concept of compassion that I think is foundational is the idea of trust. I think if someone isn't compassionate with you or isn't compassionate with me, I will say, I don't necessarily trust them. And when we're looking at an organization, we're looking at a workplace, what do you think leaders most misunderstand about their role in creating that trust and, by extension, psychological safety?
Before I answer that, something dawned on me as you were sharing with us around how I choose a doctor.
Okay.
I choose a doctor by asking people who may know them. And I say, I want somebody really smart, graduating near the top of their class, and incredibly empathetic. Because I have had the doctor who's incredibly smart without the empathy. And the reason it hooked me, what you had said, was I don't listen to them. Like, even though I'm very clear they're much smarter about whatever the subject is than I am, there's a distrust in it, right? And so to bring that to kind of organizational life, I think leaders really misunderstand the whole nature of permission giving and seeking. Okay, so if I'm an employee and I'm permission seeking, I'm looking for, yeah, I agree with you, the nod of the head, the confirmation that I, as the boss, a blessing to whatever it is you're coming to seek permission for, or I'm going to tell you how you should do it, and I'm the one telling you. Okay. And so immediately in that dialogue, the boss is taking away all accountability from that person and the trust because the person sees that they have to seek that permission in order to be bestowed the trust, and that's not it, right? It's when the employee can leave without permission of what the boss would do and go do it that they feel that sense of trust. Now, there's the other side of the formula too, which is permission giving. So what's in it for the leader, right? There's all those psychological things. I feel good. I'm addicted to knowing. I'm worthy. I'm not an imposter. So all these things for the leader are taken away from the employee so that the leader can feel good about themselves, right? So when you can reduce that permission giving and seeking, you immediately raise the level of trust between subordinate and boss.
Right. Is there something inherent in the way many workplaces are structured that causes that gap?
I think it starts earlier. I think it starts with mom and dad at school, permission seeking. I used to do a lot of work in school districts with the superintendents. And you could see, I call it the cascade of fear, all the way down from the board to the superintendent, to the assistant superintendent, to the principals to the department heads, to the teachers, all the way to the kids. And you go, it is, and when you look at all the research on education, what do they say? Fear is the worst thing to put in a learning environment, right? And so it starts there. you raise your hand because you want permission. You want permission to go to the bathroom. You want permission to answer a question or whatever it is. And then at home, it's not so, different. And you build up credits with your parents, maybe, or maybe you don't. And it's always permission seeking. And there's a period where Jung said individuation between the parent and the child, where the child actually feels independent enough to separate from the parent in that permission giving. I remember the moment it happened for me, and I was quite old. I was totally surprised because in so many parts of my life, I could be independent, but there were certain tethers there that you hang on to. So now bring that into the workplace, and you go, a lot of tethers, a lot of background noise, there's a lot of people out there in the world who think that we bring our family systems into the workplace. This permission seeking, I think, starts so early for all of us.
That's so interesting. And we could have a whole episode just on this topic. I know an independent professional. I work for myself. I've got team members, but we're loosely, confederate, loosely connected. One of the things that was the biggest thing for me in going out on my own was exactly this. I was tired of having to ask for permission to do things or doing things and then getting dinged because I didn't ask for permission to begin with. And I wanted to free myself of that.
Yes. So now let's think about all those people that are listening who are in organizations where this is going on. And you can't really specifically say it's the leader's fault or the follower's fault, right? It is within the system, within the ecosystem, but it doesn't mean it can't change. It's that if the only way out is independence, which is a clear choice, which you made, and a healthy one, right? There's also, how do you change the system? How do you change what's being at play between the leader and the followers? And so often when people seek our company out, we're asked, like, how do I create this accountability in the culture other than putting in these kind of technical fixes, like have a meeting on this day, have a report on this day, use this software, right?
Yes. I'm seeing things through such a different lens now. So many of those kinds of activities are to provide a structure or sort of, I'm going to say fight against, but I'm not sure that's the word I mean. This quality that so many of us come into the workplace with. Well, by the time someone gets to a leadership position in their firm, they have likely spent several years as an employee, maybe working their way up, maybe went to business school, maybe took some training. What do you think we're missing in leadership development programs when it comes to overcoming this that we're talking about, this permission seeking and permission granting, and building a place that really is compassionate?
I think there's a lot of experts out there, like the folks who talk about psychological safety and things like that, but they obscure it a bit. Like, I use that language, but it obscures it a bit rather than saying what really is happening. And when I went to Harvard Business School, I did Covey, I've sat in on some Tony Robbins, I've done so many of these programs. And in the end, I don't think I've ever heard anybody really talk about it. And I think I stumbled upon it when I was writing my last book, Just Ask Leadership, on why great managers always ask the right questions. And it was in an interview with Mike Harper. And I spent 4 hours at his house, which was such a gift. And like, the guy took Conagra from 500 million, almost bankrupt, to 20 billion in 17 years. And we had this discussion about how he wouldn't give the answer. So somebody would come into his office, and these are presidents reporting because they run big businesses within Conagra. And they'd say, so Mike, what do you think? Mike would say, I asked you all the questions that I had. Doesn't really matter what I think. What matters is what you're going to do. What are you going to do? He goes, I'm going to do this, this, and this. But what do you think? No, you're not going to trap me in that. And so they'd be shaking hands goodbye. And at the door, they would try again. Right. And then during lunch, they might have bumped into each other. Hey, Mike, you already know what I'm going to do. Tell me. Come on. Tell me what you think. No, that's when it dawned on me. That was the first, like, how is he knows this so clearly. Never heard it from other leaders. Aspen Institute. I hang out with some of the best thought leaders, and nope, nada.
Wow. Why not? Why isn't this something that is coming to the fore or we're teaching in business schools?
I wonder if it has to do with how we feel about ourselves. So, from the leadership standpoint, our insecurity. So, why has Brene Brown been so popular? One is she delivers the best speeches ever. You're right. Oh my God, talk about authenticity. And it's very hard for people, humans, to be vulnerable. And they think that it gives up power. So I think there has to be a part of that in it. And yet we all know when somebody shows up authentic about their inauthenticities, we tend to love them like immediately. We trust them, higher trust, right? But the risk that it seems for people because of this notion of needing to be a perfect leader or a iconic leader, I think gets in the way, or a feeling that it would give away power if we were to not give the answer.
Right. And that's the desire to have power is to, in a shocking lack of creativity, is very powerful draw for people to.
It's a draw. And when you think you're immune, some of my closest friends have gotten quite famous. And some of them I've had to be distant because they don't see how the ego has taken over who they are with name dropping, not only where they've been, who they've been with, the wealth creation that they're making from that fame. And when you call them on it, this sense of thinking of leadership and self-deception, the book by Harbinger, they'd say in the box. They can't even see how self-deceived they are about who they are in a world. At our company, we talk about walking the ridgeline. And on one side of the ridgeline, on the top of the mountain, you could fall off to one side, and that would be humility. So we often find clients come to us when they're feeling really humbled by what's happening to them in their business, right? And the thing we ask them to be leery of is the other side. We will help them get to the top of the ridgeline where they have to balance. And on the other side is ego, right? And this ego is so massively self-deceptive that they don't want to believe it. And it's interesting how quickly the coach was so helpful to them until that point, and now they're idiots.
Yes.
And so we think of it as, for leaders, how do they walk the ridgeline? How do you help them stay on the ridgeline? If they don't have enough ego, they can't lead. It's just right. So if they show up with too much humility, no decisions will be made, no actions will be taken. And if they show up with too much ego, nobody wants to follow them unless they buy their cooperation.
Yes. As you're saying this, I just think, well, the ridgeline, I love that analogy. And I'm actually thinking of a ridgeline that I was literally walking on many, many years ago and looking down and realizing how much I had to be balancing. And it just makes me think leadership is really hard.
It's really hard. It's really hard to talk about the real parts of it. It's very easy to talk about the technical parts of it.
Yes. Yes. But when you talk about the real parts of it, then you're talking about things like what I learned when I was 5 and how I learned to see the world and how that's different from how you learn to see the world. So that's why we get along or we don't get along. And not that leaders need to be our therapists, social workers, but they have to have some of those skills.
They do. Well, I mean, there's plenty of examples of leaders who lead many people who do not have those skills. I think of that as they're leading through power, right? And that's very different than leading and inspiring a whole community of humans to want to do the thing, the bigger collective action together, as opposed to being told and being paternal to.
Right. And I'm coming at it from the perspective of admiring and supporting and wanting leaders, the latter type that you just discussed. But I do recognize that is not how everybody leads. That is not what everybody's even looking for as a leader. Well, we're living in some interesting times if you think about our politics and our social environment here in the US. How do you think that is influencing leaders and leadership styles?
It's a challenge. And the challenge is we're seeing a form of leading that gives authenticity or permission to people to misbehave. And that misbehavior, it's kind of like, if the most powerful person in the world can do it, why can't I do it? And that's been going on now for a decade and a half, around, the way in which we speak about language and what's okay. The other day when the plane went down and the immediate response was, that's because of DEI. And you're like, oh my goodness, like, if that's the language we use in leading at the highest, most powerful place in the planet right now, then it really gives permission to some people who don't want to think deeply about their own leadership and realize, one, is it's so unlikely that they could get away with it, but two, that they feel like they have permission to get away with it.
Yeah, that's one aspect of our current environment I find heartbreaking.
Mm.
Just knowing, I guess, knowing what it's like on the other side, knowing what it's like to work with a leader who is truly compassionate and supportive. And it's just hard to see.
I think it was part of my calling to move from, I still say I'm an entrepreneur because we're building a coaching business. It's very different though than the business that I built with my partner, Rick Diamond. And the calling is, how do you help leaders who are really good thinkers and lifelong learners be even better, right? And that's where the joy is. We certainly work with people who show themselves as more authoritarian, but they have to know what they're getting into with us, because we will, if they don't want to change, it won't be a good fit with us, because we don't think that's the best way to lead human beings. And it's just proving to be more and more so, with the exception of what we're seeing more global manner. And the good news is I don't do the global thing, right? Happy to work with people from different countries and have, but I'm talking about world power. It's a very different beast.
It is. Absolutely. So we're getting really close to the end of our time. And I wanted to ask you one additional question before we start to wrap up. We're talking about compassion and psychological safety and trust and all of these. How, as a leader running your own company, or you help other leaders do, how do you actually measure that or show that that's making a real difference? Is there a way to draw a straight line, point A to point B? We did this and this got better because of it.
Probably more of a mosaic than
Okay.
a straight line. Um, there are measurement tools. I am trying to remember the one. Office Vibe was the one we used for many years at our company, and we decided that we're so small that we didn't want to use it anymore. But what it did is it served up, it had about 360 questions against 12 categories, and you could bring it down to the departmental level and actually see what people thought on a ongoing basis, not on one of these, like Gallup does their thing where 12 questions about employee engagement, but like annually or twice annually. I mean, what this does is every week or every other week, you set the boundaries of that. It'll ask 5 to 6 questions in a gamified way around these topics. And so I found it incredibly interesting. And every time, whenever there was an open-ended question people answered, I'd write them back, what do you think we should do about it? Because they often offer it as a challenge or a disappointment. And, they quickly see that there was a desire in me as the leader to want to change the outcome. And to me, no reason using those tools if you're not going to act on the feedback. And it doesn't mean you have to do everything people are asking, but to respond to it, to be of inquiry to it. I think if you want a tactical measurement, I also know that I get waylaid by employees, and it's one of my greatest joys. You go into the office and they go, you don't know me, and I often do know who they are. And they go, whatever you're doing with the boss, keep doing it. It's working. And I'm like, okay. That to me is the measurement for us of when we're doing the job well. And clients' kids at like a bar mitzvah or a wedding come up to me and they go, you don't know me. Again, not true. And they say, you changed my life. And I'm like, what? And it's the ripple of what has happened with that leader that is, permeating the organization that is so, I think it's what keeps me at this.
Absolutely. That is amazing because often we, especially as outside consultants, third parties coming in, we often don't see some of the changes directly. So to get that kind of feedback and validation for the work that you're doing. So we are at time, but I'd love to know what is giving you hope these days?
There's two things. One is if you look at human history, we're such a tiny little piece of it. And we've seen how crushing and awful things can happen over our history. I mean, I don't know why the Crusades are coming to mind, but the Crusades, right? And you go, and it's not the Crusades anymore, right? So when you look at human history over a longer period of time and you say we're a bleep in that. So if I'm worried about humans, then I go, there's something to be hopeful about because so much has shown that there is, but it doesn't mean it will not be without contest.
Right.
In the micro way, the work that I do individually with clients gives me hope all the time because you get to see those ripples firsthand and create meaning.
Absolutely. Well, Gary, thank you so much. Before we say goodbye, how can people reach you and learn more about your work?
CO2coaching.com is our website. I think if you type GaryBCohen.com, it'll show up on my bio page on our website. They can pick up my book, Just Ask Leadership, Why Great Managers Always Ask the Right Questions. We also have these 2 assessments that are free. We have one that we work with clients with, but we don't offer that. And the 2 that are free is called Peak Leadership. And it will give people the style in which they ask questions. And what we learned from this was we all ask about 25% of the questions available to us because we tend to bias our questions to one style. Unlike a Myers-Briggs or a DISC, you're not wedded to the style. You can break it by understanding it. So it's open, and you can do this as an individual assessment or a 360. And there's no cost because I decided I'm not in the business of assessments. And I went out there initially selling it, and I'm like, I don't want to be in that business. So we just give it away because we spend so much time and money on doing the research to make it work. And then the other one is offered through TCI, Team Coaching International, and we offer it through our firm, where a leader can come on and do an assessment of their team. And if they want the paid version, then it's a 360 and every team member does it. But we find it gives really good insights to the leader about how the team is showing up against, I think it's like 72 elements of 14 categories. So it's really insightful. And they'll find that under resources on our website, CO2.
Great. I will put links to those in the show notes to make it easier for folks to find you and to find those. Gary, thank you so much. I have loved our conversation.
Me too. Thank you. What fun.
Thank you for listening. I'm Manya Chilinsky. I help organizations build compassionate, resilient teams that thrive by creating environments where well-being is at the core. Often people reach out to me during times of crisis or significant change, but the truth is that building a healthier, more supportive workplace can prevent issues before they arise and empower your teams to thrive no matter what challenges come their way. If you're ready to make a meaningful change, I'd love to connect. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcast or your listening platform of choice. It really helps others find us. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit my website, www.manyachilinsky.com. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.